Hewitt, last day broadcasting from Studio North. A little nostalgic this morning, but there's a lot of news. Let's get right to it. Most of the important stuff involves Vladimir Putin increasingly out of control. Well, he's been out of control for a long time, increasingly terroristic. Russia unleashes its biggest barrage of strikes on Ukraine since the invasion, is the headline at the Wall Street Journal this morning. Putin's mass strike on Ukraine draws furious condemnation, writes the New York Times. Ukraine begs West for air defense after Russia threatens further strikes, comes the Telegraph. This is around the world. Eyebrows are arching at what will Putin do next. This morning, news items from John Ellis, the Substack. I think if you're serious about being informed, you really ought to subscribe to the first three items. The first one comes from the Institute for the Study of War. Russia forces conducted a massive missile strike attack against over 20 cities, including Kyiv, yesterday. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces launched over 84 cruise missiles, 24 drone attacks, 13 of which were carried out with Iranian-made Shahed-136 drones. Ukrainian air defense shot down 43 of the 84 cruise missiles, 10 of the 24 drones, and 3 unspecified drones. Russian forces launched missiles from 10 strategic bombers operating in the Caspian Sea and from the Nizhny Novgorod Iskander short-range ballistic missile systems and 6 missile carriers in the Black Sea. Russian forces launched in the drones from Crimea and Belarus. Ukrainian media reported 70 targets were hit, including 29 crucial infrastructure facilities, 4 high-rise buildings, 35 residential buildings, and 1 school. Putin claimed to have ordered the missile strikes as retaliation for a terrorist attack on the Kerch Strait Bridge, which is, of course, a strategic target. He is responding to pressure within the Kremlin from hardliners who would like to go even further up the escalation chain. Then Ellis cites Lawrence Friedman. Everything that now happens in this war, including the murderous missile attacks on Ukrainian cities, has to be understood in terms of the logic of Putin's position as a failed war leader. He is desperately trying to demonstrate to his hardline critics that he is up to the task. The opening salvos of this week, ending yet more innocent lives for no discernible military gain, will not make Ukraine less determined or able to win this war. They will have the opposite effect. That goes on quite long. Finally, Wolfgang Munchau closes his admonition. A nuclear explosion on European soil would have dramatic implications. It would be the single largest environmental catastrophe of modern times. When the bomb goes off, you would see the biggest financial meltdown in history. Sovereign debt markets would be wiped out. If you think there's a 10% chance the debtor gets wiped out in a nuclear attack, you might as well go to a casino rather than buy a bond. Extreme tail risks, like a meteorite hitting the Earth, are usually, and rightly, treated as zero risk. But when the probabilities shift even a tiny bit, we enter a different world. With the success of Ukraine's counteroffensive, we have transgressed into a situation where the probability of a nuclear strike is no longer zero, from Euro Intelligence. This is why I read Ellis items in the morning. From the Telegraph, the Times of Israel, energy workers join Iran protest, endangering the regime's coffers. These are Iranians living abroad, for example, in the UAE, and they're refusing to work. At home, the price of gas went up overnight again. The average American price of gas is up to $3.92. In Nevada, in Washington State, in Utah, in Colorado, in places where there are significant Senate elections, they are spiraling out of control, particularly in Nevada, where Cortez Masto, the Democrat who is a Joe Biden cipher, is in very bad shape. Adam Laxalt. It looks like a takeover there. The Fed's Brainerd, the number 2 person at the Fed, says rates will slow economy over time and that the monetary policy will be restrictive for some time to ensure that inflation moves back to the 2% target. Quote, it will take time for the cumulative effect of tighter monetary policy to work through the economy to bring inflation down. Joe Biden's inflation is indeed harming you every single day. Senator Murkowski in a dead heat with Shabaka in the latest Fox News poll. I don't know who Shabaka is. I would vote for Lisa Murkowski, Alaska. Your seniority wants you to be your natural self-interest wants you to run the Energy Committee when the Republicans take over in the Senate. There's going to be a Republican from Alaska. It's a question of whether or not Lisa Murkowski brings her seniority, and I think you ought to vote for seniority in your own self-interest. She's a fine senator. I don't agree with her 100% of the time, but she mostly gets things done. J.D. Vance in a debate with Tim Ryan last night. Cut number 8.
Why are food and groceries getting so expensive? One reason is that we let communist China buy up American farmland, threatening our food supply and our national security. Tim Ryan and Joe Biden make this worse. Ohio gave a poor kid like me a fighting chance, but it won't work for the next generation unless we protect what's ours. I'm J.D. Vance, and I approve this message because I'll stop communist China from buying our farms. America should belong to Americans, not our enemies.
So that was an ad. I'm sorry, I meant to go to the debate clips. Here's the first debate clip. They're talking about China, JD, and Tim Ryan, cut number 10.
Well, look, absolutely.
That is, by the way, no longer the situation. It is Democrats have totally become extremist on the abortion issue. More JD Vance, cut number 12. And then finally, he brought up, of course, immigration and drugs, cut number 15, because Ohio's been... That, by the way, I think won the debate, the election, the hands down. My mom was an addict. She's clean and sober. We have to do something about an open border. I think J.D. Vance won that with biography. I'll be back to review what happened between Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes last night. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Drucker, that music means he's in the house, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Hugh.
So a new super PAC is attacking Warnock on running over his wife. Tell us about that.
Well, listen, the super PAC actually is the Herschel Walker super PAC that's existed for this election cycle to boost Walker on the outside. I think what was interesting about this new ad, which has body cam footage of Warnock's ex-wife, just basically talking to a police officer at the scene, and she's shaken and in tears, and she's saying, allegedly what she believes happened. This is not new footage that's never been aired. It's not an incident that's never been litigated somewhat in the campaign. It was discussed and it was used a little bit in the 2020 campaign when Warnock beat then Senator Kelly Loeffler. What's interesting about this is that the Walker super PAC, their names are like Warnock Walker. It's like I mangle them sometimes because they're almost similar at the beginning. What's interesting about this ad is that the Walker Super PAC has been focused on inflation, gas prices, groceries, kitchen table issues, all of the top issues, the issues Republicans want to talk about that they should be talking about. The fact that the Walker Super PAC decided to run with this ad this close to the election is an acknowledgement on their part, unstated maybe, but an acknowledgement that the revelations about Walker and the alleged abortion he paid for and all of that are having an impact on the race, and that they're concerned it could irreparably damage Walker in the final weeks of the campaign. And so what they are trying to do is, one, muddy the waters and basically say there's not just one candidate here with a potential character flaw, there are two. And therefore, if you're stuck with two candidates with character flaws, maybe you get back to the issues driving the campaign, which are you are unhappy with Biden, inflation is high, crime is rising, and that's where your vote should go, versus one seems to be senatorial and one does not.
Now, in Pennsylvania, I expect a lot of ticket splitting. I think Josh Shapiro will win handily, and I think that Dr. Oz will win in the end because voters know what they want. I think Brian Kemp's big lead in Georgia does not necessarily equal a bounce for Herschel, but it might be a significantly greater coattail for Herschel than Shapiro is for Fetterman, simply because Herschel is well known and has this reservoir of goodwill. What do you think? Will Walker run ahead of Fetterman?
Well, that's a really great question. And it's a really interesting way to look at this. Look, I think, number one, this is a cycle where Republicans have tailwinds, not headwinds, right? So
correct.
That's going to help somebody like Governor Kemp potentially give a boost to down-ticket candidates, and that includes Herschel Walker. Now, I think it's interesting that as much of a folk hero as Herschel Walker has been, and it's like 100% name ID and a known personality, a known quantity, they haven't campaigned together, and I don't know that they will campaign together. But I think, what Democrats need to happen for Warnock to hang on is they need voters, and this would primarily happen in the greater Atlanta area to go into the booth and, vote for Kemp and vote for Warnock. And I know there are some Republicans who think that could happen. And when you look at the polling, we consistently see a strong lead for Kemp and a sort of neck-and-neck race in the Senate contest between Walker and Warnock. And so I think that there's a better opportunity for Kemp to have coattails than for Shapiro, simply because of the atmosphere of the election cycle. Plus, I don't know that we can compare Pennsylvania and Georgia entirely because we're dealing with different issues. I mean, I think Fetterman might be in a better position to swim upstream if the stroke that he is recovering from had not hampered his ability to campaign normally into the fall. And also, Mastriano is just a weak candidate who, anything can happen, but you can't look at the governor's race in Pennsylvania the same way as the governor's race in Georgia.
I also don't know that Josh Shapiro has the same kind of organization that Brian Kemp does after 4 years as governor. Josh Shapiro is an attorney general, but he's going to win. I'm looking at the gas price in Georgia. The average price of gas is up to $3.25. Now, that's nothing compared to California, which is double that. All right, so it's nothing. It's still, I think, a motivating issue, a kitchen table issue. 1 minute, David. Is gas everywhere it's just going the wrong way for Biden at exactly the wrong time?
Look, I was just in Wisconsin. It's over $4 a gallon there. These contests are, in many ways, always a function of timing as well as atmospherics. Again, the fundamentals of the campaign, even amid stronger Democratic enthusiasm, the potential for a stronger than normal midterm turnout for the party in power in the White House, have always been with the Republicans, and gas prices on the rise. Anything like that hurts Democrats and their ability to overcome history at the end.
Boy, and the markets are not helping Joe Biden either. David M. Drucker on Twitter. Thank you, David. Read him every day in the Washington Examiner. See him on Fox and everywhere else. And this unfolds. Byron York is my guest. You see Byron most nights on Fox News. He writes every day for the Washington Examiner. You follow him on Twitter at Byron York. Byron, let's start with polling. I look at Real Clear Politics listing every day, but I always add 5 to the Republican. I mean, I just do. If it's a 1-point race, it's a 6-point race. If a Republican's losing by 3, I just say, okay, they're ahead by 2 and in the margin of error. What do you think about polling this year?
Well, I think it's probably wrong in a number of states. And what Real Clear Politics is trying to do right now is in a more precise way what you were doing. So what they're doing is this. We know that the polls in a number of states were wrong in 2016, Trump-Clinton race. They were also wrong in 2018, the midterms, and they were wrong again in 2020, the Trump-Biden race. So what Real Clear Politics is trying to do, and let me say one thing, these are not national polls. The national polls are actually a little better in those 2 presidential races, and also this is just where the polls are right this moment, 28 days before the election. So what they're trying to do is they're looking at, say, Pennsylvania. Okay, the Real Clear Politics average has John Fetterman up by 3.7%. And if you look at all the polls in Pennsylvania, you're talking about 16, 20 polls going back. They all have Fetterman in the lead. So how did the polls do in Pennsylvania in prior years? In 2016, they had Clinton up by 8.6 at this moment. They had, in 2018, they had Bob Casey up by 16, and in 2020, they had Biden up by 6.5. When you compare them with the final result, they overestimated Democratic results by 5.9%. So it's almost exactly what you said.
Yeah, add 5.
So you take the Fetterman and you add 5.9, and actually Dr. Oz is up by 2. You can do this in most of the other races. As a matter of fact, the Georgia polls were actually pretty good. So when it says that Warnock is ahead right now, it looks like Warnock really is ahead right now. Arizona polls adding a couple of points to the GOP. Nevada polls are interesting because they're the only ones that underestimated to the other side. They underestimated Democratic results. still Laxalt looks ahead in that.
You know, the interesting part, this is a little below the headline in Nevada, the Harry Reid machine has fallen apart. The state Democratic Party has been taken over by the ideologues of the left. And no one will admit this out loud. That's a disaster for Democrats in Nevada.
No, the Harry Reid machine was so powerful. I went out there and covered his last re-election race. And, you know, getting the buses to all the casinos, to all the kitchens, to all the service workers, the efficiency of the Harry Reid machine. I mean, everybody had voted for Harry Reid before Election Day. It was very, very good. And you're right, they're not nearly as good at that. And that does, you know, in my just guess right now, when I look at the Senate right now, I think Republicans pick up one seat, and Nevada is the place they do it.
You know, I'm actually more optimistic than you because I think Joe O'Dea is the sort of candidate who I've watched. Wayne Allard from the West Slope, Bill Armstrong, Cory Gardner, they throw a horseshoe every now and then. And although that electorate has changed dramatically over 20 years that I've been going there, Michelle Austin used to drive me around there to various events. I'll be back in Denver in a week. And it's become purple and then blue. But I think it's very swingy in the off year, and I think the Latino vote is very definitely crushed. You know, you drive a long way in Denver, Byron. People go to work. If you get on the 25 or the 225, they drive a long way to go to work. So these gas prices matter a lot in Colorado.
I actually went out and covered the race that Cory Gardner won, spent some time with him out there, and he had found kind of a formula for dealing with a number of issues like immigration, and had really attracted a lot of independent voters in addition to Republicans. So it's possible, but I'm sticking with my scenario right now, which is basically everybody holds their seats, and that's including Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz winning, Georgia, Warnock winning, except in Nevada, where Laxalt picks up a seat from the Democrats.
Well, let me get your 2 cents on Alaska. I believe Lisa Murkowski always pulls it out, and I think she will again. But yesterday, Fox News ran a story saying the challenger, whose name I can't remember, is actually pulling ahead. I actually think the Murkowski machine is a colder, smaller version of the Reid machine.
Yeah, I think that also in Alaska you do have this different factor, which is ranked choice voting, which a number of people believe was put in there to preserve Lisa Murkowski's seat. That it's difficult for her to lose when you get to add up the last place finisher's vote to the leader's vote, or not to the leader's vote, but whoever they voted for second. When you take our first and second votes, then it's very hard to beat her in that case.
Now, Byron, I want to switch to substance for a moment as opposed to horse races. I have been I'm writing a column for the Washington Post, it'll be out today or tomorrow, that the hidden iceberg issue is education. I talked to one mom, just one mom, not statistically significant, who pulled her kids out of public school. They're in Catholic school. At every level, education has collapsed in the last 2 years, or at least it has become visible to parents how ideological and incompetent schools are and how teachers' unions are running the show. I think this is a giant iceberg of an issue in a swing demographic that's poorly covered. What does Byron York think?
Well, I think that it's a different issue than it was ever before because of what happened during the pandemic, which was not only were parents angry when their children when schools closed and they had to have their children home. They're not happy about that. They also saw when their children were taking Zoom classes what their children were being taught, and I think you had more parental exposure to school curricula than you had ever had before, and that has changed this. You know, one small thing. Randy Weingarten, the head of the teachers union, who really was responsible for a lot of schools staying closed, fought hard to close schools and keep them closed. She is now in Ukraine right now, sort of looking at the situation for children in Ukraine, which is terrible because there's a terrible war going on. But when she tweets about this, the blowback is huge. Like haven't you done enough to hurt schools in the United States? Do you have?
Yeah,
to
she is
travel
perhaps the
world?
least effective leader of that union ever.
Absolutely, and so I think parents correctly place blame on the teachers' unions and on Democrats who can say now that they were all for keeping the schools open, but you can't change their record, which is they were responsible for keeping schools closed.
Byron, every day the gas price in America, the average goes up. Well, it's like every day for 4 weeks now. It just goes up, and it's going to keep going up.
Yesterday, yeah.
What do Democrats even attempt? That's a cold wind blowing from the north on their electoral chances.
Yeah, it is, and I think it was yesterday. Politico Playbook did this piece saying, as the Dobbs effect fading, in other words, the abortion effect is that which seems so powerful for Democrats in the midsummer, is that fading? Well, it is fading a little bit, but what's happened is we've just had this brutal reminder that inflation is high. And it appears to be chronic. Excuse me. Appears to be chronic for some, at least for the near future.
While you clear your throat, I want to ask you very quickly about whether or not the end game for Republicans is going to be focused on Georgia, focused on Pennsylvania and Ohio, or focused on Wisconsin, where Ron Johnson's run another superb race and Mandela Barnes is flailing.
Well, I think Ron Johnson's going to win in Wisconsin. I don't think there's going to be a lot of drama about it. I think I'm really looking at Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, where it's entirely possible that Dr. Oz wins in Pennsylvania, because he does have some momentum on his side now, and that I'm sure you talked about this. Selena Zito, the
Yes.
premier political reporter in Pennsylvania, wrote a story about Oz. And he's going everywhere. He's pressing the flesh. He's doing old-fashioned, traditional in-person campaigning, and it is working for him. He wins there. Walker loses in Arizona, and Laxalt wins in Nevada.
I'm more optimistic than Byron, but both of us see a Republican Senate coming. Thank you, Byron York. Follow him on Twitter at Byron York. Hugh at Josh Kroshauer with Axios, one of the best political reporters in the land. Josh, I just posted on Twitter an excerpt from a new New York Times story. Quote, Representative Sean Patrick Maloney, who had once hoped New York would ease his burden as chairman of House Democrats' campaign arm, is facing a viable challenge, with internal polls from both parties showing a dead heat. In a suburban area, President Biden won by 10 points. That's the New York Times about a senior Democrat. Boy, are they in trouble, Josh.
Yeah, Hugh, and New York is going to be one of those really fascinating states to watch on election night, because that is a state where the issue of crime is front and center. We saw the incident at gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin's home over the weekend, and crime is rated as a top two issue in almost every district in that state. One of the ads that the Republicans have gone up with against Congressman Maloney is a comment he made at a debate in 2018, where he came out in support of some of these bail reform measures that have really raised concerns that it's a fueling the rise in violent crime in New York City and elsewhere. That's going to be a big issue, and that's what's driving the competitiveness in the state of New York. Now, the special election that was held over the summer was good news for Democrats, but Republicans think there's going to be much bigger turnout in a midterm that could be driven by a lot of other issues: inflation, crime, and certainly the economy.
We don't talk much about Lee Zeldin on the program. I like Lee Zeldin a lot, but I just assume the Empire State is blue. I'm beginning to wonder whether or not we might be shocked early on election night, because Kathy Hochul is sort of an invisible governor. She's an accidental governor. Crime is out of control. Inflation is killing people. And property taxes in New York are driving people out of homes. I went to Chautauqua this year to give a speech, and people who've owned Chautauqua for 4 or 5 generations, the property taxes are killing them.
Yeah, the economy is an issue everywhere, but in these governor's races, it's hard for Republicans to win in a blue state like Washington State or New York. If it's a federal race, if it's about abortion, if it's about who's going to control the Senate, but these governor's races tend to be much more localized. And I've said, Oregon, governor's race in Oregon is very winnable for Republicans for a whole host of reasons, but one of the issues is crime. New York, Lee Zeldin has had the second time he was attacked on stage violently by some crazy person a couple months ago, and then you have this incident that happened right near his home, next to his home, and then you look at what's going on in New York City, where people are basically being released from prison and committing violent crimes, days later. It's a systemic issue, and it's related to some degree to this bail law that was passed a few years ago. Yeah, I do think that governor's race is going to be competitive. It's hard for any Republican to win in New York, but cases are their own different kind of. They have their own different processes, and in a blue state where crime is out of control in some areas, and the economy is certainly a problem, there's a good chance. I wouldn't say a good chance. There's a chance that Zeldin can make that a race in New York.
Let's talk about Alaska as well. I think Lisa Murkowski is going to win because Murkowski's always win, and I think Alaskans are very savvy about seniority. She has enormous influence over what gets done and doesn't. She opened up Anwar during the Trump budget. If they replace her for a first termer, that first termer goes to the back of the line. So they don't really trade. Trading out Republicans doesn't make a lot of sense for Alaskans. What do you think?
Well, Alaska has this interesting voting system where it helps someone like Murkowski, who has a broader coalition of support, versus her one of her Republican opponents, Kelly Tshibaka, who's the Trump-endorsed Republican in that Senate race. It's going to be close. It's interesting when you look at the polling out of Alaska. Murkowski actually polls a lot better with Democrats than is. So she's going to need to get enough Republicans to get her over the finish line. The new voting rules in Alaska certainly benefit Senator Murkowski, but some of the polling I've seen still shows this is a very close race.
I would never bet against Murkowski. All right, the over-under on the House I've got right now at 25. Are you over or under a House Republican pickup of 25, Josh?
That's about. I have it at 20. If my white balloon has about a 20 seat pickup, but I do think that it's more likely we'll see higher, a little bit higher than that than lower than that.
Yeah, so I'm actually leaning. I was a push on 25. I'm now going to the over because the winds are so strong against the Democrats. In the Senate, I think I've set my line at R+1. Are you over or under on that, Josh?
Well, yeah, that's. I'm either at 50-50, so that would be no one gains a seat, or R+1. Pennsylvania, to me, is Georgia and Pennsylvania. Whether this Herschel Walker news that really damages his standing in the state, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact, but it's a close race, and any little negative development certainly matters. Pennsylvania is going to be the big one, I think, too, where Oz has got the momentum, but Fetterman started out with a lead. The political environment's going to say a lot of where Pennsylvania goes. I look at Ohio and Georgia. Their governors are so strong. Mike DeWine's like up at 25 points. Brian Kemp is close on double digits. And Stacey Abrams is just flailing around and making, it's embarrassing to Democrats. I just think in both those two races, J.D. Vance and Herschel Walker benefit greatly from the strength at the top of the ticket and the machine that brings. Josh Kroshauer, follow him at Josh Kroshauer. He's over to Axios Freedom every day. I'll be right back. Hour number 3. Senator Tom Cotton joins me. America, stay tuned. Campaign trail from Colorado to Georgia and beyond, helping Republicans win control of the Senate. Good morning, Senator Cotton. Welcome back to the program.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you.
Joe O'Dea was on yesterday. I gather you've been out in Colorado helping Joe. How's that feel to you out there?
I have been. I think Joe O'Dea is going to win because Michael Bennet has been a rubber stamp for Joe Biden's left-wing ideological agenda that's driven up the price of gas to $4 a gallon in Colorado and made people struggle to buy groceries, and also resulted in Colorado being the car theft capital of the country, not exactly what you want to be the leader in the clubhouse on, Hugh. Michael Bennett's been voting with Joe Biden almost 100% of the time, whereas Joe O'Dea will be a voice of clear-eyed common sense for the people of Colorado.
Let's go down to Nevada. Adam Laxalt is a Yale law student graduate, as opposed to you being a Harvard law graduate. But I still think he knows a little bit about the law. He was a very good attorney general. Have you been to Nevada for Adam Laxalt yet?
Not only did he have the misjudgment of going to Yale, but he also joined the Navy instead of the Army, Hugh. But despite all that, he is a fine candidate who's going to beat Catherine Cortez Masto, who, again, is a rubber stamp for Joe Biden, and he's going to be a great senator for the battle-born state as well. I was actually with Adam last year at the very kickoff of his campaign. I hope to get back out there again later this month or early November, because I want to be a part of the big winning victory that we're going to have in Nevada on November 8th.
No, I want to talk about Herschel. Herschel was on my show last week, made his comments denying the Daily Beast report. And as far as I can tell, not one major media outlet has confirmed the Herschel paid for an abortion story. It's just the Daily Beast reporter and the woman who's making the allegation. I don't think that's going to change many votes, Senator Cotton. I really don't. I don't think Raphael Warnock running over his wife is going to change many votes. I think people are going to vote their pocketbooks in the Peach State. What do you think?
Yeah, Hugh, I agree with that. And the way you know that Herschel Walker is beating Raphael Warnock is the Democrats and their liberal allies in the media are throwing every smear against him that they can. Look, Herschel has acknowledged that he's an imperfect person like everyone and that he has been saved through grace. And we know that Herschel, when he gets to Washington, will be a check on the Joe Biden agenda, whereas Raphael Warnock has been voting with Joe Biden 96% of the time. You know, the people of Georgia gave Raphael Warnock a chance 2 years ago. It's kind of a short 2-year probation term in the Senate, and he has not earned their confidence. He's voted for $5 trillion of new spending. That's why we have 13% runaway inflation. He's voted time and time again to keep our borders open, whether it's refusing to fund our Border Patrol as opposed to 87,000 IRS agents, or to take a soft on crime approach. Just think about it. Last year, in their blowout $2 trillion spending bill, they gave stimulus checks to prisoners, Hugh. Stimulus checks to prisoners. I offered an amendment to stop that. Raphael Warnock voted with Joe Biden and every other Democrat to make sure that prisoners, depraved felons, got stimulus checks. That's why we have runaway inflation. And that's why Georgia is ready to make a change and elect someone who is going to be a voice for Georgians, not a rubber stamp for Joe Biden. And that's Herschel Walker.
Now, Senator Cotton, there's a Washington Post story today, the headline of which I vamped on a little bit earlier. Spread of Catholic hospitals limits reproductive care across the United States. That headline, I'm astonished that got passed. Headlines are not written by reporters. Reporters went out to prove that Catholic hospitals are a menace. But the headline, Spread of Catholic hospitals limits reproductive care across the United States, is simply a lie. Catholic hospitals deliver babies left, right, and center. Catholic hospitals perform D&Cs when an ectopic pregnancy is there. It's just a lie. What is going on with America's media? It's like it's lurched off of the cliff.
Well, the Democrats and their media wing, Hugh, have become completely radicalized on abortion over the last generation or so. Remember what Bill Clinton used to say to you, that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. No Democrat will say that today. I've asked many Democrats who come in front of our committees for confirmation votes, do you agree with what Bill Clinton used to say? For that matter, his wife was saying it as recently as 2008. Abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And they refuse to say it because they don't think abortion should be rare. They want to celebrate abortion. They are not pro-choice. They are affirmatively pro-abortion. Now, the Democrats are running a lot of attack ads on Republicans around the country, speculating about what a Republican majority might hypothetically do. Hugh, we don't have to speculate about what the Democrats would do. They voted on it earlier this year in the United States Congress. Late-term partial birth abortion would be mandated in all 50 states, and your tax dollars would pay for it. Hugh, it's so bad they would override parental consent laws for abortions for minors. Think about it. If the Democrats got their way in Congress, an adult could take a minor child to a doctor for an abortion without getting consent of her parents. You can't provide Advil to a child in public schools without the consent of their parents, Hugh, but that's how radical the Democrats have become. So you shouldn't be surprised that you see headlines like this in the Washington Post. It's just another example of their ideological pro-abortion agenda and also their attack on the faith of people who don't support that pro-abortion agenda.
You know, Senator, what confuses me about the Democrats is you would think they would be running on public education and defending it, but they're not. Even though Randy Weingarten and the teachers union support them down the line, they are running away from that issue. You are the father of two young boys who have to, I don't know if you go to public or private school, and I don't want to know. I just want to know whether or not you have heard on all these travels from Colorado to Nevada to Georgia, wherever you go, that parents are voting for Republican and they're voting against incumbents on school boards because the schools have failed miserably in the public sector.
Well, Hugh, the reason why Democrats aren't running on education is that they saw in Virginia last year how unpopular their slavish devotion to the left-wing agenda of the National Teachers Union is. I mean, you got Terry McAuliffe saying that parents should not be involved in their kids' education. That's the example of the classic Washington gap. Terry McAuliffe said what he actually believes and what most Democrats believe, because that's what teachers' unions believe. People like Randy Weingarten don't think parents should be involved and they think parents are a hindrance to education because they demand accountability. They want a curriculum that teaches their kids to succeed in our economy and how to be good citizens as well. Teachers' unions, especially at the national level, people like Randy Weingarten and their Democratic mouthpieces in public office want to indoctrinate our kids, teach them to hate America, and frankly, teach them that their parents are probably benighted and backwards looking as well. That's why Democrats aren't running on education, and that's why in all of my travels, I almost always meet new school board members who have run for the first time in the last 2 years, and let's just say that they have the zeal of the converted, and then we're going to be electing many more of those school board members in the months ahead.
And they have to pull the trigger. They have to fire superintendents. Superintendents who failed in the shutdown are still failing with the reopening. Senator, let's finish on Arizona. Blake Masters wants to join you in the Senate. Kerry Lake wants to succeed Doug Ducey as governor. They're running in the most pro-parental state in the union. Arizona passed and Doug Ducey signed the comprehensive voucher, $6,000 per child, which a parent can send anywhere. The best thing to happen to education in America in the last 100 years, opening up the idea that dollars follow the students, not just $1,000, not just $1,500, not $6,000 a student. Is that helping Blake Masters in Arizona against Mark, whatever his name is, Kelly? And is it helping Kerry Lake against the lady who's just invisible, Hobbs?
I think it's helping both of them, and I believe that Kerry Lake will be the next governor of Arizona. She's a true dynamo on the campaign trail, and Blake Masters is going to beat Mark Kelly. I mean, if you saw that debate last week, Hugh, it reminded me of the scene from Rocky IV when they're saying to throw in the damn towel as Ivan Drago is pummeling Apollo Creed. Someone should have thrown in the towel from Mark Kelly's camp because Blake Masters came chapter and verse to explain exactly why Mark Kelly has been an absolute rubber stamp for Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and the Democrats' radical agenda. He's voted for all that spending. He's voted to be soft on crime. Maybe most importantly in Arizona, he's voted to keep our border wide open. Now, he can say all he wants in 30-second campaign ad, but the simple facts are that he has never deviated from the Democratic line, and that's why Arizona is facing a completely open border and all the crimes and drugs that come with it, nor would he break from the Democratic Party line when it comes to things like the backpack bill that Governor Doug Ducey in Arizona passed that's going to empower parents as opposed to teachers' unions and superintendents who care more about their own school's budget and fiefdom than they care about kids getting the best education as their parents see fit.
So Senator Cotton, their federal role in education can be as large or as small as you want. You can always use the spending clause. It's constitutional to condition it. Do you foresee a day when federal spending will be conditioned on a state having a voucher option available for parents? Because we cannot continue to trap students in not only failing, but failed and disastrous public schools.
Well, I'd like to see a day like where every state has a backpack bill of that kind, Hugh. As long as the Democrats have 40 votes in the Senate, I suspect it might be hard to get that through the United States Congress. Right now, I'd probably settle on a Department of Education that doesn't insist that boys get to play girls' sports or teenage boys get to go into girls' bathrooms or sleep with girls on overnight trips. Or demand that schools conduct racial inquests and divide their students based on the color of their skin. That would be a good first start for the Department of Education, Hugh.
You know, I don't think there's an issue in my experience on 23 years on this show that is so everywhere driving voters and is so little noticed in education, in media circles, as the revulsion at radical chic infecting K through 12.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh, if you just look at some of the practices and curriculums and teachers who were exposed during the pandemic when parents finally saw what their kids were learning, I mean, again, you had kindergartners or second graders being exposed to sexuality. Hugh, there should be no curriculum at all at that level talking about such things. They don't even know what you're talking about at that level. But you have these radical teachers trying to indoctrinate them in their crazed gender theories. Or look at what kids were learning in their history classes in junior high and high school, learning to hate America, to think that it's somehow founded on racism and white supremacy, as opposed to being founded on the Declaration and the promise of human equality and building a more perfect union. I think parents were shocked across the country to learn what their kids were being exposed to at school, and they've rightly wanted to take the reins back. And again, I see it everywhere I travel, Hugh. You have a handful of parents who stepped forward and said no more, and God bless them, and I hope parents in every community do the same thing the next time they have school board openings.
Last question, Senator Cotton. We've got $31 trillion debt in the United States. You've proposed taxing endowments to pay for vouchers for vocational education. I've begun to think about that. What is the total amount of endowment that is open for taxing? And do you have any idea how much is held by these higher ed institutions total?
Hugh, I don't have it at my fingertips, but I remember when we were first crafting the legislation, it's a shocking number. It's tens of millions at individual schools. So when you add up these most prestigious credentialed schools, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, if not into the billions of dollars. And again, these are schools that have long ago abandoned the purposes for which they received the tax break to begin with, and who frankly won't use their endowments to support education at their schools to the degree they could, Hugh. I'm not even talking about spending the principal. I'm just talking about spending their interests and their earnings.
You're on to a target, boy. I am so supportive of going after those endowments. We will talk more about that in the future. Follow Senator Tom Cotton on Twitter at SendTomCotton. Thank you, Senator. Always a pleasure.